The next thing we're going to add is a trigger. Now, triggers are interesting because they are executed when a certain event happens in the data. And what we want to do is we want to capture that moment when an overdue fee might need to be added. And that happens when the return date is updated. So when an item is returned, the date is added to that record, and then we need to decide, oh, do we need to charge an overdue fee or not? And so a trigger works ideally for this because we just don't do anything until that happens. And so we can set up this trigger. Let's go ahead and just get started. We have to drop it just like we do all the other things that we do. So now we're going to drop the trigger if it exists. And I'm going to call this trigger overdue check. And that's what we want it to do, is to check when there's an overdue. And then we're going to create this trigger. So notice you follow this pattern. These are all very similar, right? With procedures and triggers and functions, they all look very much the same. Okay, now with a trigger, they have to work on a single table, and we need to specify what table they're associated with. So this is going to be on the rental table, and it turns out that you can have multiple triggers on the same table, and that's okay, but each trigger can only be associated with one table. And then we want to say when this trigger is going to happen. So it's going to be related to this table, and when is it going to happen? And we want it to execute after there is an update. And that's when we want it to pay attention. Run this if there's an update, or after an update happens, right? And then we do that same basic as. And now we can focus. We don't really want it just an update on the rental table itself, but we want it on a specific column. So not just on a specific row, but a specific column. And we can add that using the update command. So I'm going to say if update, and inside this update command, I'm actually going to put the column I'm referring to. And the column is the return date. And now I've narrowed it down, not just updating the rental table, but now it's specifically when return date itself is updated. So if something else is updated, it won't trigger this. It won't happen. Okay, so now I've narrowed it down to a specific column, and I'm in this if statement, so I'm going to begin the if statement and end the if statement, and that gets us set up with a trigger that will work on a specific column. Now we are seeing one problem. There's that red squiggly line under there. So if we run this, we have a syntax problem. It says create trigger must be the first statement in query batch. And what we've got going on here is we have other statements. And what I forgot to do was put a go statement after this drop. And so now that will execute the drop statement, and that will put that trigger. Notice we got rid of that red squiggly line under that. So now we're syntactically in better shape. Down here, the end is squiggly just because it wants something to be happening in here. So let's just do something in there, and now let's execute it, and it's running fine. So syntactically, we're all in order.